Hello everyone, it is July 2nd, 2024. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday! Welcome to this week's episode. So today I'm going to talk about trills, and specifically two-handed trills. This is something I've covered before in the past, but I thought maybe I'd have something new to say, and at the very least I've taken some slow motion footage and talk about that as well. So specifically I'm going to be talking about two-handed trills, and you might ask, what is a trill? So basically a trill is when you play a note and the note above it in rapid succession back and forth. So for example, D, E, D, E, D, E, or E, D, E, D, E, D. And in the Baroque period, this was called a shake, which I kind of like the idea of, we're shaking back and forth between these notes. You can of course do that with one hand. For example, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. But to get the fastest and most even trill on the harp, you have to use two hands. And you do that by alternating 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, etc. So that's it. There we are. End of episode. Bye. Easier said than done, right? So with that alternating back and forth is not only is the timing a bit tricky, but we're hindered by the fact that we're replacing on the same strings. So if we don't get that timing exactly right, we're going to try to play a string and the other finger has not yet played it. Or we hear the strings get stopped too soon. So we really have to wait until the last minute to place. I always like to imagine some sort of bird of prey hovering and then swooping down at the last minute to land on the strings. And so getting that timing and that coordination is something that takes quite a bit of time. It's the type of thing where you're not going to master it in a day. It's worth spending a little bit of time on it, 5 minutes a day or something, over a longer period of time to really start to groove that timing. And for me, when I practice a trill slowly, what I like to think about is wrist movement. I don't actually do it when it's fast. I definitely, when it's fast, there's very little movement, right? Trying to keep it as efficient as possible. But it's kind of this idea of that sometimes if we practice sort of the fullest form of some movement, when we do it fast, we're taking that essence of the big full form and condensing it. Or it may be that the wrist movement is completely useless, but I like it. It's a nice way to relax, and this idea of coming up and then dropping back down. So the wrist movement, right, is when you hinge at the wrist like this to come up and away from the string, and then, very important, to fall right back down again to a neutral wrist. So and the idea of the fingers opening up a little bit in preparation and dropping right back down. And it's a way to kind of stay relaxed and get that feeling of a very relaxed movement. As I say, when I'm playing faster, that wrist motion is not there. But that is something I like to think about and do if I'm practicing a trill quite slowly. We'll go to the slow motion footage here in a moment. I wanted to just mention that what happens if you want to start on the upper note of a trill. So for example, again, in the Baroque period, almost all the trills would start, if it's a written D and we're trilling on D, we'd start on E first. And in general, if you're doing a two-handed trill, I think the best way to do that is to start with just the thumb note in the right hand. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. We certainly don't go 1, 2, 1, 2. We still keep that 2, 1, 2, 1 pattern. We're just starting with a thumb and then going 2, 1, 2, 1. And yeah, so that's just something to be aware of. So let's look at this slow motion footage and look at the trill in more detail there. Okay, so I've recorded some slow motion footage. Let's take a look at it and see what's going on in slow motion with, of course, slowed down sound as well. So here I'm starting slowly and gradually speeding up. You can hear at times it's not completely even there at that slower speed, but not too bad. One thing I notice is just looking at the hands. Of course, my goal is to stay as relaxed as possible, and as always, even though I'm just playing with two, to use all four fingers as one motion, right? But you can see that my left hand in particular, the pinky stays a bit curled in here if we keep playing this. Check out that pinky's maybe not as moving with all the rest of the fingers, whereas in the right hand, all the fingers are doing a pretty job of moving as one unit. Not bad. We can also see, I'll go back to the beginning here again, the difference between the thumbs. So my left thumb, I use this top joint, right, to close on top of the finger. Whereas with the right thumb, it's more of just a push. And let's check it out from a different camera angle here. Maybe this one gives us a slightly different view. You can see how that right thumb just kind of goes sideways. And this is something that's not just with trills, this is something I do with both hands. It's not something I'm conscious of. It's not something I was specifically taught. I was taught that the full expression of the articulation can include a bending of this top joint. And that's what I think of when I do, a full close and full play. But when it's fast, the right thumb definitely does that sort of little semicircle where the thumb stays straight and just a small close. Whereas the left thumb, even when it's fast, it tends to involve this joint as well. I'm happy with that. It's not something I feel I need to change, but anyway, it's just interesting to see the difference between the two hands. We can also see how the left hand is a bit more compact and the right hand is a bit more space. And this is also, I think, true because in general, the left hand, when it plays, has slightly wider spacing because the strings get slightly wider spaced with the bigger strings, and the right hand maybe slightly smaller. And the left hand often has big stretches. And again, the bigger the stretch, the lower the thumb and the higher the fourth finger, for example, so that instead of being like this, where you can't create much space, if you're like this, you can create quite a bit of space. And so I think the left hand is just naturally used to playing slightly more condensed, whereas the right hand may be a little bit more like this. And that means that conveniently, the hands are not fighting over the exact same spot on the string. I would normally say that, again, the left thumb should be lower than the right thumb, and the left finger should be lower than the right finger, like this. But in actual fact, what I'm doing is more like this. Again, the goal is to try to be near the center of the string with both hands, so we don't have some huge discrepancy. We wouldn't want something like this with a thumb lower than the right finger, because we'd really hear that difference in sound on something like a trill where they're all supposed to sound the same. But interesting just to see that kind of difference. Back to another one here. This one I'm starting quite slowly. You can really, I think, on this one see that wrist movement. A little bit there. On these slow ones, very slow, slower than some of the others, falling back down. And you can see how my right thumb closes with that full expression of articulation. But as I start to speed up, it's going to become straight. Yeah, still. So gradually getting faster, still a little bit of wrist going on here. And now you can see this, look how little the thumb moves. So earlier, the thumb was moving from here all the way down, or the left thumb from here all the way up and down. And now, at this fast speed, barely any movement. And again, that timing, right, to avoid the other played strings. Here's an even slower version without any sound. Here we can really see the timing of how I'm placing the second finger just a little bit earlier than the thumb. Which kind of makes sense, right? That the thumb is the last note played, so the safest string is the last string played, so the safest string to place is the second finger string, because the E will have the most vibration, the most force is the last one played. So I'm placing a little bit earlier, but at the same time, I think you can see here that it's not as if I play 2 before placing the thumb. So 2 gets placed a little bit early, but both fingers are placed before the second finger plays. And so here again, from this angle, you can see that I'm not maybe relaxing my left pinky quite as much as I ideally would like to. It doesn't feel tense. Again, that's one of the keys to something like this. It's so many fast notes in a sense, but it has to feel really relaxed. If you start to tense up for that speed, it's not going to work. So trying to stay as relaxed as you can and just letting those notes flow one after another, because you've done all that work of getting the timing down, and again practicing slow and relaxed and loud and bringing that feeling to the fast and even feel of the more condensed, the essence of that bigger movement. So hopefully that's given you some ideas of how to approach a two-handed trill if that's something you're not comfortable with or not familiar with at all. And it's a really beautiful and satisfying sound. Is a bonus if you get that timing down. A tremolo like that will feel even easier because you don't have to worry about replacing on the same strings. If you're doing 2-1, 2-1, that same timing but on different notes. We don't actually often get that many opportunities to do a two-handed trill because oftentimes the left hand is busy playing, so we end up having to do something like 1-2, 1-2. But it is a really nice thing to know how to do and fun to practice on, and over time get that better and better and more even, and that timing really down crisp. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next week for another episode of Harp Tuesday. Cheers.